Russia just transferred approximately 400 cruise missiles to Iran. And with that single delivery, Iran's precision strike capability now extends to targets it could never effectively reach before. This is not a marginal upgrade. This is not Iran adding a few more rockets to its existing arsenal. This is a fundamental shift in what Iran can credibly threaten to destroy with precision. And that changes the strategic calculus for every U.S. commander, every Israeli planner, and every oil trader operating in the region. In this analysis, I'm going to break down exactly what was transferred, show you precisely how this changes the strike range map, explain what it means for oil markets and defense investments, and walk through 3 scenarios for how this plays out over the next 12 months. Let's start with what we actually know. For decades, Iran's missile program has been limited by one fundamental constraint: the trade-off between range and precision. Iran has always been able to build missiles that fly far. Their Shahab series can reach 300 kilometers. The Ghadir variants extend that to nearly 2,000 kilometers. On paper, these numbers sound impressive, but these are ballistic missiles, and ballistic missiles have critical limitations that most people don't fully appreciate. A ballistic missile follows a predictable arc. It goes up, reaches apogee, and comes down. That arc can be tracked by radar from the moment of launch. Defense systems like Patriot and Thiad are specifically designed to intercept these predictable trajectories. And perhaps most importantly, ballistic missiles, particularly older designs, lack the precision to reliably hit specific targets. When Iran launches a ballistic missile at a military base, they're essentially hitting somewhere within a football field-sized area if they're lucky. They might hit the base perimeter. They might hit an empty parking lot. They might miss entirely. This is why ballistic missile attacks, while psychologically impactful, rarely cause decisive military damage against hardened or dispersed targets. Cruise missiles are an entirely different weapon. A cruise missile flies low, often below 100 meters altitude, hugging terrain to avoid radar detection. It doesn't follow a predictable arc. It can adjust course multiple times during flight based on GPS guidance, terrain matching, or terminal seekers. And critically, modern cruise missiles strike with meter-level accuracy, not football field accuracy, meter-level accuracy. The difference is the difference between hoping you hit something important and knowing you will hit the specific building, the specific bunker entrance, the specific command center you're aiming at. The problem for Iran has always been that building cruise missiles at scale requires technology they've struggled to develop domestically. Turboan engines that can sustain long-range flight, advanced guidance systems that can navigate without external correction, miniaturized electronics that can survive the flight environment. Iran has made progress on all of these, but their indigenous cruise missiles remain limited in range and questionable in reliability. Russia just solved that problem with a single series of cargo flights. According to multiple intelligence assessments, open-source flight tracking analysis, and reporting from Reuters, The Wall Street Journal, and other outlets, Russia has transferred an estimated 400 cruise missiles to Iran over the past several weeks. The specific systems reportedly include Kh-101 variants, a Soviet air cruise missile originally designed to carry nuclear warheads, and potentially newer Kh-101 models with even greater accuracy. If these reports are accurate, this represents the single largest upgrade to Iran's offensive strike capability in at least 2 decades, possibly ever. Let me walk you through the evidence. Starting in late March, open-source analysts monitoring flight tracking data noticed an unusual pattern. Russian Antonov and 124 heavy transport aircraft, some of the largest cargo planes in the world, specifically designed to carry military equipment, began making repeated flights between Russian air bases and Iranian military facilities. These weren't normal flights. The aircraft flew with transponders intermittently disabled. They took indirect routing to avoid certain airspaces, and they landed at military facilities, specifically Mehrabad Air Base near Thrawn and facilities near Isfahan, rather than civilian airports. Over a 6-week period, analysts tracked at least 17 confirmed flights matching this pattern. Given the cargo capacity of the AN-124 and the size of Kh-101 missiles, these flights could have transported between 300 and 500 cruise missiles, depending on configuration. US and European intelligence agencies have reportedly assessed that the cargo did indeed include cruise missile components. Multiple officials speaking to major news outlets confirmed that Kh-101 air-launched cruise missiles were part of the transfer, along with associated guidance systems and potentially technical advisors to assist with integration. The Kh-101 deserves specific attention because it represents a generational leap over anything Iran has produced domestically. Originally developed by the Soviet Union in the 1970s and 1980s, the Kh-101 was designed as a nuclear delivery system for strategic bombers. The conventional variant, which is what Iran reportedly received, has a range of approximately 2,500 kilometers. It carries a 400-kilogram high-explosive warhead, and it uses a combination of inertial navigation, terrain-following radar, and GPS updating to achieve a circular error probable of approximately 15 meters. To put that precision in perspective, Iran's best indigenous cruise missiles have estimated accuracies of 50 to 100 meters. The Kh-101 is 4 to 6 times more precise. That's the difference between hitting a building and hitting a specific room inside that building. The 400 missile estimate comes from triangulating multiple data points: the number and cargo capacity of confirmed flights, the intelligence assessments cited by major publications, and analysis of Russian military inventory movements that suggest older Kh-101 stocks being drawn down. I want to be clear about epistemic standards here. This is an estimate, not a confirmed count. The actual number could be lower if some flights carried spare parts or other equipment. It could also be higher if additional transfers occurred via ground routes through the Caspian region, which would be harder to track. But even if the true number is 250 missiles rather than 400, the strategic implications remain profound. This transfer also didn't happen in isolation. It follows Iran's provision of thousands of Shahed drones to Russia for use in Ukraine, over 4,000 units, according to Ukrainian military officials. The cruise missile transfer appears to be a direct reciprocal arrangement: Iranian drones flowing west to support Russia's war, Russian missiles flowing south to enhance Iran's deterrent. But here's what makes this different from previous Russia-Iran military cooperation. Previous transfers focused on defensive systems. The S-300 air defense system that Russia sold to Iran in 2016 was designed to protect Iranian airspace from attack. It was a shield, not a sword. Cruise missiles are offensive weapons. They are designed to strike targets at long range with precision. That distinction matters enormously when we examine what Iran can now credibly threaten. Let me show you how the map has changed. Before this transfer, Iran's precision strike envelope extended approximately 700 to 800 kilometers from its borders. This range, covered by indigenous Sumar cruise missiles and similar systems, put the Persian Gulf states, most of Iraq, and parts of Saudi Arabia within reach. Significant, but limited. The Kh-101 extends that envelope to 2,500 kilometers. Look at what falls inside that circle. First, every single U.S. military facility in the Gulf region is now within range of precision cruise missiles. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar hosts approximately 11,000 U.S. personnel and serves as the forward headquarters for U.S. Central Command. Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE houses F-35 squadrons and critical surveillance aircraft. Camp Arfjun in Kuwait supports 15,000 personnel. Naval Support Activity Bahrain serves as headquarters for the 5th Fleet. These bases were always within range of Iranian ballistic missiles. But there's a massive difference between being targeted by weapons that might hit your base somewhere and being targeted by weapons that can hit your command building specifically. A ballistic missile attack on Al Udeid might crater a runway. A cruise missile attack could destroy the Combined Air Operations Center, the nerve center coordinating all U.S. air operations across 21 countries. Second, Israeli strategic infrastructure is now within precision range. Tel Aviv is approximately 1,600 kilometers from western Iranian launch sites. The Diona nuclear facility in the Negev Desert, the heart of Israel's nuclear program, is roughly 1,700 kilometers. Both are now targetable with weapons accurate enough to hit specific structures. Third, NATO facilities in the eastern Mediterranean fall within the envelope. Incirlik Air Base in Turkey, where the United States stores approximately 50 B-61 nuclear gravity bombs, is roughly 1,800 kilometers from Iran. The implications of precision cruise missiles being able to reach a nuclear weapons storage site should be obvious. Fourth, critical energy infrastructure throughout the Gulf is now vulnerable in ways it wasn't before. The Ras Tanura oil terminal in Saudi Arabia, the largest offshore oil loading facility in the world, handling approximately 6.5 million barrels per day, is now within precision strike range. The Upkike processing facility, which handles nearly 7 million barrels daily, is similarly exposed. Let me be precise about the operational shift this represents. Before this transfer, threatening these targets required Iran to use ballistic missiles with limited accuracy and relatively high interception rates. Defense systems like Patriot could meaningfully degrade an attack. The uncertainty of whether missiles would actually hit important targets reduced the deterrent value. After this transfer, Iran can launch low-flying cruise missiles that are significantly harder to detect and intercept. They can target specific buildings rather than general base areas, and they can do so with enough missiles to saturate point defenses. If Iran launched 50 cruise missiles simultaneously at Rosa Noura, current defense coverage would intercept some, probably not all. And it only takes a few precision hits on critical loading infrastructure to shut down operations. That changes the risk model for everything that happens in the Persian Gulf. For Warnomics viewers, the critical question is always, how does this affect markets? Let me break down the economic implications. First, oil prices now carry an elevated geopolitical risk premium that is unlikely to dissipate soon. Since reports of the transfer emerged, Brent crude has added approximately $6 to $8 per barrel in what traders call geopolitical premium. The additional cost reflecting conflict risk in producing regions. The math is straightforward. Before the transfer, the probability of successful precision strikes on Gulf energy infrastructure was assessed as relatively low. Ballistic missiles are trackable, interception rates are meaningful, and accuracy limitations reduce expected damage. After the transfer, that probability assessment changes. Cruise missiles are harder to intercept, more accurate, and can be launched in salvos designed to overwhelm point defenses. The expected value of potential damage to energy infrastructure has increased, and markets are pricing that in. This premium will persist until either the missiles are neutralized through military action, which seems unlikely, or the geopolitical situation de-escalates significantly, which also seems unlikely in the near term. Second, shipping and insurance costs have increased materially. Lloyd's of London, the world's largest insurance market, has reportedly raised war risk premiums for vessels transiting the Persian Gulf by approximately 40% since April. Every tanker moving oil through the Strait of Hormuz now costs more to insure. Those costs flow through to oil prices, then to refined products, then to consumers at the pump. If you've wondered why gasoline prices have remained elevated despite crude not hitting extreme highs, increased shipping risk is part of the answer. Third, defense sector equities have responded predictably. Raytheon, which manufactures Tomahawk cruise missiles and Patriot interceptors, has risen approximately 12% since transfer reports emerged. Lockheed Martin, which produces THAAD and various missile defense components, has seen similar gains. The market thesis is straightforward. If Iran's offensive capability has expanded, regional allies will need to upgrade defensive systems. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and others are all likely customers for additional Patriot batteries and potentially THAAD deployments. Fourth, safe haven assets have seen increased flows. Gold has risen approximately 4% since the transfer reports, with ETF inflows indicating institutional investors hedging against escalation scenarios. Now, let me walk through 3 scenarios for how this develops over the next 12 months. Scenario 1. Deterrence holds. In this scenario, the missile transfer functions exactly as intended, as a deterrent that changes adversary calculations without being used. Iran's expanded strike capability makes U.S. and Israeli planners more cautious about offensive operations against Iranian nuclear facilities or military assets. The missiles remain unused, but their existence constrains options. I assess this as the most likely scenario, approximately 50% probability. Why? Because Iran's leadership has historically preferred to accumulate capability rather than expend it. Unused missiles are a permanent threat. Used missiles are an empty launcher and an invitation to retaliation. For markets, this scenario means elevated oil premium persists but doesn't spike dramatically. Defense stocks hold gains. Gradual normalization over 12 to 18 months if no triggering events occur. Scenario 2. Limited demonstrative use. In this scenario, Iran or its proxies use a small number of cruise missiles to demonstrate capability without triggering full escalation. The most likely vector would be Houthi forces in Yemen launching at Saudi infrastructure with Iranian technical support. The target would likely be economic rather than military. An oil facility, a desalination plant, a port complex, something that causes damage and demonstrates precision without directly killing U.S. or Israeli personnel. I assess this at approximately 35% probability over the next 12 months. For markets, this scenario means oil spikes into the $120 to $140 range temporarily, then settles at an elevated baseline. Significant shipping disruption. Defense stocks surge further. Potential recession concerns if prices remain elevated. Scenario 3. Escalation cycle. In this scenario, the cruise missiles become part of a broader conflict. Either Iran uses them in response to an attack on its nuclear facilities, or they're employed in a direct confrontation over the Strait of Hormuz. I assess this at approximately 15% probability. Low, but not negligible. For markets, this is the tail risk scenario. Oil potentially exceeding $150 per barrel. Global recession risk. Significant equity market drawdowns. Defense stocks mixed as conflict uncertainty increases, and gold reaching new all-time highs. The key variables to monitor: IAEA negotiations over Iranian nuclear activities, signals of Israeli military planning, and U.S. force posture changes in the Gulf. If you see carrier groups repositioning or dependent evacuations from Gulf bases, reassess these probabilities upward. Let me summarize this strategic assessment. Russia's transfer of approximately 400 cruise missiles to Iran represents the most significant enhancement to Iranian offensive capability in at least 2 decades. The shift from primarily ballistic to mixed ballistic cruise forces changes what Iran can credibly threaten to destroy with precision. The practical strike envelope for high-accuracy weapons has expanded from roughly 800 kilometers to 2,500 kilometers, bringing U.S. bases, Israeli infrastructure, NATO facilities, and Gulf energy assets within precision range. Markets are responding rationally. Oil carries elevated risk premium. Defense equities reflect increased regional spending expectations, and safe haven assets are seeing inflows. The most likely scenario remains deterrence, missiles as threatened being rather than weapons in use. But tail risks are real, and prudent positioning should account for lower probability, higher impact outcomes. This is the kind of development that doesn't dominate headlines, but fundamentally alters the strategic landscape. Iran is measurably more dangerous today than it was 3 months ago, not because of any change in intentions, but because of a quantifiable change in capability. And in strategic analysis, capability is what matters. Oromics covers the intersection of military strategy and market impact, analysis you won't find on cable news or standard financial channels. If this breakdown helped you understand what's actually happening in the Gulf and what it means for your portfolio, subscribe and turn on notifications. I publish strategic analysis regularly. I want to hear your assessment. Which scenario do you think is most likely? Deterrence, limited use, or escalation? Share your analysis in the comments. And if someone in your network needs to understand what this transfer actually means, share this video with them. I'll see you in the next analysis.